Hey, friends! Just so you know, we enjoy the swear word and we rely on good old fashioned humor to get through some seriously dark subject matter. At no time do we intend any disrespect toward the victims or families of the victims in the cases we cover. Also, be sure to listen to the end for a few palate cleansing bloopers to reset your mindset. And with that, we thank you for listening and we hope you enjoy. Hey, friends, welcome to Crime Will Tell. I'm Carrie.
And I'm Jami.
Hello, my podmates. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I don't want winter, but
Yeah,
that's
no
a conversation for another day.
Yeah. Why are we in Wisconsin?
Right? Like,
What the fuck are we doing?
I know.
If only Wisconsin was on the equator.
Yeah. Okay, so what are you enjoying today to drink away your feelings?
I am sipping on some larceny bourbon with a little bit of ginger ale, just to jazz it up a scotch. And what are you drinking, Carrie?
I am drinking Jefferson's Ocean. I forgot that I had it. I was rooting around in my bourbon cabinet and I was like, do. Ooh. I was like, what is this little tiny unassuming bottle back here?
Who's this little guy?
Yeah. So today's case is wild. I don't really know any other adjective to use to describe it. It's wild, and this is a heavy case. It's heavy.
Okay.
This case will likely stir up like strong feelings in people about a delicate subject. So today we're going to be discussing rape and incest.
Okay.
And so if you're listening to this and this one isn't your cuppa, we totally get it.
Yeah.
Bow out, skip this one, and we'll see you back for the next episode because rape and incest, these types of sexual assault, sexual abuse cases, they're very difficult. So this is heavy. So I hope you have a lot of larceny.
I do.
Cheers, my friend.
Cheers to you.
Clink, clink. All right. So we're going back to the cold winter day of Wednesday, February 6th, 1986. We're on Long Island, which for our international listeners who may not be familiar, Long Island is a part of the state of New York, which sits on the eastern seaboard of the United States. And it's essentially just that. It's a long island that sits like alongside of the state. And then it's, there's a bunch of bridges that you can get back and forth. So we're on Long Island, part of the state of New York. Cheryl Pierson was 16 years old at the time. She was a cheerleader at Newfield High School. And this was in Selden, which is a little tiny town. Actually, it's a hamlet, which I have a bunny hill. Nope, bunny slope. No, not. Boy, I clearly want to go skiing. A bunny hole to say about hamlets. But Selden is a little tiny town situated on Long Island. When I was researching this case, I had never heard the word Hamlet before, aside from Shakespeare's Hamlet.
Yeah.
But Hamlet, it was identifying Selden as a hamlet on Long Island. I'm like, what the hell is a hamlet? I look it up and it's like, well, you've got metropolitan areas, and then you've got cities, and then you've got towns, and then you've got villages, and then you've got townships, and then you've got hamlets, little bitty teeny towns.
Aww,
and I'm like,
cute.
oh, isn't that cute? In the last 72 hours, I've literally been hearing about hamlets on television, in articles, Hamlet everywhere. And I'm like, feel like I would have known Hamlet before if I had been introduced to it before.
Yeah.
So it was very strange. It was just a strange 72-hour cycle with this word Hamlet. Anyway, Selden is a hamlet. And Cheryl, she had a serious boyfriend. Okay. His name was Robert Cuccio. She had a large circle of friends. And that morning of February 6th, 1986, she was getting ready for school. She was walking down the hallway in her home because it was her responsibility to let the dog out in the morning so that the dog could go do his business. And as she's walking down this hallway towards the door, she passed a window and she happened to glance out and she saw her dad, James Pierson, lying on their concrete driveway in the snow, face down. And he wasn't moving.
Oh,
And she's
shit.
like, Jesus. So she immediately runs outside. She's alarmed. She's screaming, Daddy. And she's not getting any response from him. And
Fuck.
so she was like starting to panic. So she ran to her neighbor's house and she pounded on their door. And they opened the door and she's like, something's up with my dad. He's laying on the driveway. There's blood. They're like, all right, you go back inside your house with your sister, stay with your sister. We'll call the police. And so they called the police. This was the day that her life changed forever. So I don't know if your initial reaction to she ran to the neighbor's house and pounded on the door. I don't know if you were like, why did she run to the neighbor's house
Yeah,
and
why
not?
didn't she just go back inside and call
Yes,
the police
yes,
on her own?
exactly. I had the same thought.
Okay. Yeah, 'cause I was
And
like,
right. And I'm like, okay, there's more to this story, but she was 16. She wasn't yet an adult. She wasn't yet she wasn't still a child. But that's still an age where if something is wrong, you go for an adult.
right. That's
Do you know
true.
what I mean? You go find an adult, an authority, somebody that's going to be able to fix whatever the fuck is
Yeah.
going on.
They'll know what to do.
They'll know what to do. I don't know what the fuck to do. My dad is like laying in a pool of blood on this driveway. I don't know what to do. No one else is home except for my baby sister. I don't know what to do.
Wow. Yeah.
So Cheryl, she was born in 1969. She grew up on Long Island. She grew up on Long Island with her mom, Kathleen, her dad, James, who we just met in an unfortunate state,
Yeah.
and her two siblings. She has a younger sister, Joanne, and she had an older brother, Jimmy.
Okay.
And for Cheryl's younger years, her upbringing was pretty typical of most other middle income families in the 70s. They had a nice house. Kathleen was a stay at home mom. James was gainfully employed as an electrician. The Vietnam War was on the boob tube daily. The women's lib movement was raging. Men, fun fact, started moving away from wearing suits all the time, AKA Mad Men in the 60s, to a more varied wardrobe, more comfortable wardrobe, and exercising started to become an intentional thing to do to become and stay healthy.
Okay.
Remember the exercise videos that came out in the 80s with the leotards and stuff?
Uh-huh.
I still like watching those videos on YouTube.
Creep.
There were no cell phones at this time. There were no gaming tablets. Video games weren't really a thing. There was no round the clock news cycles, no social media, no internet used by the public. This was like pre connectivity time.
Right.
You had your friends, your imagination, a rusty ass bike, and a deadline to be back before the streetlights came on. That was the typical life, and that's what Cheryl grew up in. That's the environment she grew up in the 70s in Long Island. Around the time Cheryl was 10, so about the 1979-ish time, things started getting a little bit more somber in her house. Her mom, Kathleen, had become sick, and she started having some pretty serious health problems, specifically with her kidneys. And this kidney issue that she had was so severe that she would spend months on end in the hospital, like upwards of 9 months. Like the first
Damn.
time Kathleen went into the hospital, she was there for 9 solid months. That's a really long fucking time to be. She
Wow.
had a very serious kidney disease. And her sister Joanne at this time was only 2 years old. Her brother Jimmy was basically an adult and off doing his own thing. He still lived at home at this time, but he was, in his own world. But Joanne, her sister, was only 2. There's 8 years difference between Joanne and Cheryl. Cheryl was kind of left to pick up the pieces of the domestication side of things at the house. So she was picking up all of the stuff that her mom used to take care of while her mom was in the hospital getting treated. She was a de facto mom to her sister. She did all of the cooking and the cleaning and the household chores and things like that. And I think that's a lot of responsibility to put on a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
That's a lot. But she was happy to do it. This is the kind of person that Cheryl is. She was happy to do it. She was happy to support the home and be there for her sister Joanne. Their dad, as I mentioned, James, was an electrician. He worked for a company, but he also had his own electrical company on the side. It wasn't really a company, but like he worked for the electrical company as an electrician, but then he would do odd jobs as well outside of his 9 to 5, if you will, to make extra money
Nice. Okay.
because he was a skilled electrician. And his role in the house was to support the family financially. So he worked out of the home. And that was another reason why Cheryl really had to step up to kind of help out. I was thinking about this. If you have a good relationship with your mama, it is really, really hard to see her sick and suffering
Right. Yes.
because you're helpless. So that's a whole layer of feeling on top of trying to take care of the house and home and your baby sister when you're 10.
Right. And go to school and do all the other shit
Yeah,
you
and
have
your
to do.
homework and
Yeah.
all of this stuff. Kathleen, bless her heart, she waged that war against her kidney disease for several years until she finally lost the good fight on
Mm.
February 13th, 1985. She died at the age of 38.
Oh,
She was
man.
so young. When Kathleen died, Cheryl was 16.
Mm.
That's such a tough age.
Yeah.
Joanne, her little sister, was 8. So just tough ages. So within a year, all 3 kiddos, Joanne, the baby, Cheryl, the middle child, Jimmy, the older brother, lost both their parents, one to a very horrible disease and one to murder. Now, thankfully, Cheryl did have her boyfriend, Rob, and Joanne had Cheryl. So that was good. And Jimmy, of course, had Cheryl and Joanne. And so Cheryl did have a good support system with her friends, her sister and brother, and her boyfriend. And this is such a cute story. Cheryl and Robert, they met in Cheryl's freshman year of high school. To hear Rob tell it, he like saw her and thought she was the most beautiful girl he'd ever seen. And that typical like high school sweetheart love story that
Yeah.
I love so much because it's so rare nowadays. But anyways, they met and they started dating, and they had been together for about a year or so before Cheryl's mother, Kathleen, had passed away, and about 2 years when her father James was killed.
Man.
And Rob was her rock. He was her boulder, her strength, her support system. And he was really instrumental in getting her through the most difficult times in your life. Can you imagine by the age of 16, your mom and your dad have passed?
No.
Now, interestingly, up until he was killed, James, Cheryl's father, didn't really approve of her relationship with Robert.
Oh, okay.
Rob's dad was a New York State trooper and raised Rob in a very strict and disciplined household. So Rob was very respectful of his elders and he was very respectful to James. And James liked that. He liked that about Robert. He
Yeah.
liked that Robert came from a strict, disciplined household. He did not like this lovey shit going on between him and his daughter, Cheryl.
Right. Yeah.
And so he had strict rules, very strict rules dictating what Cheryl could and couldn't do. So keep that in your back pocket.
Okay.
Now, the first arriving police officer, Roy Bayard, got to the Pierson home at around 7 a.m. on that morning of February 6th. And he saw James Pierson lying face down in a pool of blood in this, like there was just a little bit of snow on the concrete, very cold concrete driveway. Like I'm like that bright red blood against white snow. It's very stark. So
Yeah.
years later, when Roy Bayard was interviewed for this case, he said he still to this day vividly remembers seeing James lying there because it was probably very stark.
Yeah.
He saw James lying there in a pool of blood. And when his body was rolled, such that he was face up, so he was laying on his stomach, when he was rolled to be on his back so that he was face up, Officer Bayard and other officers that had responded to the scene by then could clearly see a gunshot wound to his head. They saw it before he was rolled. He was shot in the back of the head. And there were holes, which looked like gunshot holes in the jacket that he was wearing.
Okay.
And there were 22 caliber rifle casings on the ground around and by his body. So they're like, okay, so probably shot by a 22 caliber rifle. Paramedics were called, they arrived, and they did attempt life-saving measures, even though it was pretty obvious that James Pierson was gone, and they weren't able to revive him. Later, the autopsy would indeed confirm that in all, James Pierson had been shot 5 times from
Fuck.
behind,
Ugh.
1 shot to the back of the head, and the rest to his thoracic, like his back chest area. He was
Man.
42 years old.
Ugh.
So both of her parents were like really super young
Yeah.
when they died. So Officer Byard had to tell Cheryl and Joanne that their dad was dead. And what was kind of heart-wrenching was that this was the first time in his career that he had to do a death notification.
Oh.
So imagine having it be your first time and you got to go into a house of a man that was just killed to tell his 16-year-old and 8-year-old daughters that their dad was shot and killed. He's never coming back. And this is literally almost to the day 1 year after their mother died.
Oh my God.
Oh, tough stuff. So everybody's reeling. This sent shockwaves through the community, I'm sure you can imagine, because I don't know if you know this, but
It's a hamlet.
it's
right?
a hamlet.
That's what I thought.
So Detective McCready was assigned the case, and the first thing he does is he gets his ass out to Cheryl's house to interview her because she was the one that found her dad. And he started by asking her if she knew of anyone that may have wanted her father dead. And Cheryl's response was, "What? Someone killed my father?" Which, yeah, I see the look on your face. Detective McCready was a little confused by this response because Cheryl knew her father had been shot. She saw the blood. She heard the chatter. Like, it wasn't a secret. They weren't like keeping her in a closet until they could figure things out. She was well aware.
He didn't slip on the snow.
Because Officer Byard had shared that with her when he told her that her father was dead. So when he gave the death notification, he was like, your father was shot and killed. Like, she knew.
Yeah.
It was told to her straight away. And then when Detective McCready was like, do you know anyone that may want your father dead? And she's like, what? Somebody killed my father? And he's like, wait, what? Okay, people grieve differently. She's 16. She just lost her father. She just lost her mom a year prior. And now she's got to take care of her 8-year-old sister.
Did she seem like she was clueless or like she was acting?
No, she seemed confused. She didn't seem like she was acting.
Okay.
She didn't seem like she was trying to like pull some shady shit. No, she genuinely seemed like, wait, what? She seemed almost like in denial.
Gotcha. Okay.
So, like I said, people grieve differently. She also found her father lying on the driveway. Her brain had to have been a mess.
Oh,
like,
for sure.
I don't even know. I think I would have been, she was in shock for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So as the interview continued, Detective McCready is asking her questions and trying to ascertain like a timeline. What was she doing? What was Joanne, her baby sister, doing? Well, she wasn't baby by this time. She was 8. But what was her little sister doing? Does she remember what her dad's routine was that morning? She's like, he was just leaving the house to go to work like he always does, blah, 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 blah. And during the interview, Cheryl just out of the blue asked Detective McCready if he wore Chaps cologne. Do you remember Chaps cologne?
I do, but it's
no offense to anyone that wore or is currently wearing Chaps cologne. It smells like diesel fuel to me. But anyway, but it was the bomb in the 80s.
Right.
So she's like, do you wear Chaps cologne by chance? Now, this is in the middle of him interviewing her about the tragic and very recent clear murder of her father.
Right.
And now he's really confused. And he's like, yeah, I do wear Chaps cologne. And she's like, well, you smell nice. He's like, what the fuck is going on here? So, okay, let me explain. Now, this seems weird, but scent is one of the senses, the olfactory senses that is most powerful at stirring up memories
Right.
or making you
Yes.
recall something,
Uh-huh.
right? Like my papa used to smoke a pipe. He used to smoke very specific tobacco in his pipe. And anytime I smell the tobacco scent that he used to use, I'm instantly transported and I feel an almost compulsive urge to go up to whoever is has this smell and say, "You smell just like my papa. You bring back so many great memories for me. Carry on with that scent, sir. It smells great." Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, scent is very powerful. And Cheryl's boyfriend, Rob, wore the same cologne. So, smelling that cologne on Detective McCready was like a comfort to
Right. Yeah,
Cheryl
that makes
because Rob
sense.
was her rock,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. It's almost like she was grasping for some branch of comfort and she found it in the fact that this detective who was trying to figure out what happened to her father wore the same cologne as her boyfriend who she was madly in love with. So, it just goes to show that things can seem really strange on the onset, but if you dive into it and you kind of peel the onion a little bit, maybe it's not so strange. So, Detective McCready is investigating James's murder. James Pierson was a hard ass. So, Detective McCready kind of has his work cut out for him because James was described by many as being quite abrasive, very strict, unbelievably overprotective. He had an authoritarian attitude.
Fun.
And that attitude dictated the way that he treated people. And he made a lot of enemies and very few friends. And as the patriarch of his family, he established the rules. He was the boss man. Every night, dinner was at 6 p.m. sharp. Then the kids did their homework. There was no television allowed, things like that. It was
Mm.
very regimented, very strict. You followed his rules or you were punished. And the same went with his business associates, his business ventures. He had a very short fuse, didn't take much to piss him off. He had one hell of a temper and he wasn't afraid to use it.
Great. He sounds like a blast.
And as investigators are starting to process the Pierson home, they discovered he had an arsenal of guns. He had so many guns. We're talking Uzis,
What?
semi and automatic weapons, all the shit a suburban dad doesn't need.
Yeah. What the fuck?
A lot of guns. And they were like fucking in the rafters of the roof and like hidden behind cupboards. Like he had a trove. They also noticed, they couldn't help but notice that the Pierson home was lavish. Now, on the outside, when you look at this home, it's your typical nice suburban middle class, all American home. On the inside, it was soups decked out.
Oh.
Like we're talking all of the best things, very nice furniture, way out of place for an electrician's typical annual income, even for one that's very, very good at his job.
Okay.
James's business was successful, but the home furnishings still outpaced that success. So the
Right.
detectives are like, okay, extra money is coming in from somewhere. Where is it coming from? Now, like I said, James did own his own little company on the side. I don't know if he even had a company, but like he did electrical work on the side. But still, even that combined with his day job wasn't enough to account for this. He did own some property, a little bit of property, nothing major in upstate New York that he collected money on. Again, all of these things added together did not account for what they were seeing inside this house. It was pretty elaborate. They also found during their search a very interesting little black book.
Mm.
And it was hidden out of sight. Not it wasn't like in a floorboard underneath a dead hand or something like that. But it was clearly in a place that somebody wouldn't accidentally come across it. And inside this little black book were names and dollar amounts next to the names of money that was owed to James. 5,000 here, 1,000 here, 2,500 there. And so investigators are like, okay, so maybe he's involved in like money laundering or has mob connections or is doing some kind of shady shit under the table, something that's bringing in a lot of cash.
Yeah.
Then they found an underground garage. Okay. Yes, technically it's underground garage, but let me paint the picture here. If you go to the side of the house, there is a garage door, and then you like go down a driveway, and the garage is situated underneath the house. So while it is technically underground, you can get to it through a normal garage door from outside, and you just kind of go downhill, down a little concrete driveway into this garage underneath the house.
Okay. So not a bunker like I'm
It's
picturing.
Right. It's not like a fully underground bunker. Only
Gotcha.
3 sides of it are underground because you can drive into it.
Gotcha.
And inside this under the house garage were expensive toys. It was filled with expensive toys. We're talking all different kinds of motorcycles, antique cars, stuff that if you have a lot of money, you can afford to buy.
Right.
And they're like, all right, what the fuck is going on here? But what really caught their eye was a recording system, which they also found in this under the house garage. And James had set up a recording system. Cheryl confirmed this to detectives, where he could listen back to any incoming and outgoing calls going through the house. So it's like he had tapped their phones.
Right. Yeah.
For whatever reason. Who knows? So Detective McCready is like, Cheryl, can you help me understand your father's lifestyle? Because none of this stuff makes sense. Like, where is all the money coming from? These are really expensive motorcycles and cars, the way that your house is decorated and furnished. Like, what the hell is going on here? Now, Cheryl is 16. She is not privy to whatever the hell her father is doing. All she knows is what she sees, and all she knows is the type of person that her father is. And she was like, yeah, if you didn't know the type of man he is, all of this that you're seeing is really hard to understand. So investigators were like, okay, you know what we're going to do? We're going to start following the money. We're going to figure out where this thread goes and we're going to pull on it.
Yeah.
And what they learned was that what James was doing was he was stealing electrical parts and supplies from his employer. And he was using those parts and supplies to do his side hustle business.
Oh, fuck.
Such that he was making 100% profit on the labor and materials. And he was doing enough of it that he was making mad money. He wasn't paying taxes on that money. He wasn't claiming it. It was all under the table. Shady as fuck.
Yeah, that's
and
real
likely
shitty.
to probably make you some enemies.
Yeah.
So now detectives are like, okay, maybe we got something here. So a few days after James's murder, Rob Cuccio's father, so Rob is Cheryl's boyfriend, contacted Detective McCready and shared that James and his son Jimmy, Cheryl's older brother, did not get along, and that James had actually just recently cut Jimmy out of his will.
That's never good.
With all the shit in the house, the underground, not underground garage, you know, everything. James's estate was estimated to be about $1 million. Now, back in the mid 80s, that is a lot of fucking money. I should have looked up how much that would have been today, but that's a lot of money for an electrician, single father of 3.
Wow. Yes, that's a fuckload of money.
So Detective McCready is like, you don't say. So James and his son Jimmy didn't get along and James cut Jimmy out of the will? Well, maybe we should explore that avenue because that smells like a fucking motive if I ever smelled one. Only just a few weeks prior to when James was murdered, he and Jimmy had a hell of a blowout fight that ended in Jimmy moving out of the family home. Well, this was intriguing So investigators set out to question Jimmy, who absolutely denied having anything to do with his father's murder. And during the questioning, Jimmy was like, hey, so I'm telling you, I did not have anything to do with my father's murder, but I think my sister Cheryl and her boyfriend Rob might have had something to do with it because Rob had once asked me to find someone to kill him.
Jesus Christ.
And detectives are like, really? You're telling me that your sister Cheryl and her boyfriend Rob asked you to find somebody to kill your father? This is what you're going with? Is
Yeah.
that your final answer? Well, they didn't have anything. They had like nothing to hold or charge Jimmy with. And they didn't really have anything else. And so they're like, well, fuck, we kind of have to run down his statement just to check it off the list.
Yeah.
We got to be good stewards of the law and let's do this. And so as they start digging a little bit more, they discovered that they discovered a little bit more about James and the way that he parented. And they learned that he parented using corporal punishment.
Ah.
Jimmy and Cheryl both regularly and for years took the brunt of the physical abuse that his father would dole out. And because of this, the relationships James had with both of them they were broken. They weren't repairable. And one night, so here's an example of what James would do as punishment. One night, Rob was over for dinner and they had finished up, and Cheryl brought out bowls of ice cream for dessert. And she gave Rob his bowl of ice cream, and she gave her dad his bowl of ice cream, and she went to go around the table to sit in her chair, and her father stood up in front of her and smacked the shit out of her right in her face with an open hand and yelled at her to never disrespect him again by serving him second.
Oh my God.
If they went to the movies, like if Cheryl and Rob went to the movies, James would follow behind them and would sit a couple of rows behind them in the theater to keep an eye on them to make sure that they weren't
Ew.
doing anything they weren't supposed to be doing.
Wow. Okay.
So this is interesting and alarming, but still, detectives are like, they were like, Jimmy's claim is a little outlandish. But they did realize that with Jimmy cut out of James's will, Cheryl stood to inherit a bigger estate of their father's estate. So they decided to be subtle at first, and they chose to question Cheryl's boyfriend, Rob, first before they went to question Cheryl again.
Okay.
So they tracked Rob down and are like, hey, why don't you come down to the police station? Because we have some questions we'd like to ask you. And so he was like, yeah, sure, no problem. So he goes down there and they start playing the good cop, bad cop routine. And he's like, yeah, okay, let's, whatever. And they start accusing him of being the one that shot James. And he's like, whoa, 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 whoa. I didn't shoot James. And they go back and forth and back and forth. Rob's continuing to deny that he was the one that shot James. He's getting a little like, hey, I didn't do this. This was not me. I had nothing to do with shooting James. So Detective McCready, as he's pressing him, he's finally like, well, if you didn't shoot him, then who the hell did? And Rob's like, I know I didn't shoot him because I paid the guy who did.
Jesus Christ. Wow, way to keep it together, Rob.
So Detective McCready was like, what now? And the story that comes out is so insane that the only adjective I can use is, aside from heinous and vile, is wild. This is just fucking wild.
Okay.
All right, buckle up.
Whew.
Side note, I want to give kudos because going forward, no one lied. Everyone was like on the up and up. So I got to give kudos where kudos are due. So Rob told Detective McCready that Cheryl had asked someone in her homeroom a couple of months previously, so this would have been in November of 1985, and asked if anyone would kill her father for money.
What?
So, okay.
Oh my God.
So,
what?
One day in November of 1985, Cheryl was in homeroom with her friends, and there was a headline that had just broken across the news that was about a wife that hired someone to kill her husband. She got caught in this murder for hire plot. Cheryl was like, hey, did anybody hear about this story? How this woman hired somebody to kill her husband? And they were like, oh my God, who would take money to kill someone? And they're like, oh my God, I know, whatever. Well, a guy that she knew, they were acquaintances, they weren't friends, but they were acquaintances. His name is Sean Pico. And he was like, I would. I would do that. I would take money to kill somebody. Sure, no problem. Me, hi. I can be the problem if you'd like me to. Yes. It was all kind of like a joke. Like, just it started with like Cheryl like talking about like, oh my God. And it just snowballed from there. Cheryl was like, it would be so awesome if my father was not here anymore.
Wow.
So after a little while, she went to Sean Pico and she was like, no, seriously, would you actually kill someone for money? And he was like, sure. And she's like, I'll give you $1,000 to kill my dad. And he's like, okay.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'll do it. So the week prior to James's murder, Rob paid Sean 400 of the 1,000 because that's all they had. $400 in the mid 80s for a couple of teenagers is a lot of fucking money. So I don't even know where they got it. Maybe they had jobs. I'm not sure. But Rob gave Sean $400 to kill James Pierson. And what's interesting is that Sean took the money, but then he was like, I'm not going to kill him. But then on the morning of February 6th, 1986, Sean did kill James Pierson.
Did he tell them that he was going to?
Mm-hmm.
He was like, tomorrow's the day or whatever.
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
Yep. But basically he hung out outside the house with a 22 caliber rifle, I think is the right way to say it. And he waited for James Pierson to exit the house to get into his truck to go to work. And he shot him 5 times, killing him right then and there.
God.
Now, no one recalls hearing gunshots. I don't know if he had a silencer. Neighbors weren't alarmed. I mean, the next door neighbor was home because Cheryl went over and knocked on the door to get them to call the police. But Sean Pica took $400 from Rob, Cheryl's boyfriend, and killed Cheryl's dad, James Pierson. And on February 13th, all 3, Cheryl, Rob, and Sean, were charged with second-degree murder. But they're like, why? So it turns out that when Cheryl was arrested, this whole sordid truth comes out.
Okay.
At the top of this case, I talked about rape and incest. Yeah.
I figured we were circling back to that.
Yep. So this is where it gets gruesome.
Okay.
So when her mom, Kathleen, got sick and started going to the hospital, by the time Cheryl was around 12 years old, she was going to the hospital with her father. And it was about this time that he started sexually abusing her and basically saying that, not only do you need to take care of the house and your little sister, but you need to take care of the bedroom things for me that your mom used to take care of.
Oh my God, that's disgusting.
Yeah. And it got to the point where she would be beat if she tried to refuse him or resist. Essentially, it escalated such that he was raping her 2 to 3 times a day, every single day.
Holy shit.
And if she tried to not be at home, she tried to get extra hours. So anything she could do to avoid him, he would start threatening to turn his attention toward her little sister, Joanne. So Cheryl was like, fuck, I got to protect her. For him to do to her what he's doing to me would kill me. Right, I can't let that happen. So she took this for 4 years and she didn't tell a soul. Well, one day she and Rob got into a fight, and about what, it's inconsequential, but out of that fight, Rob just blurted out, I know what's happening in your house. I know that you're
Aw.
having sex with your father. And she
Whoa.
tried to deny it. And then finally she was like, yes, but you can't tell anyone because he'll hurt me. He'll hurt you. He'll go after Joanne. And that's when she was like, hey, Sean, would you kill my father?
Yeah. Are you for real?
Yeah. Would you really do this? Because when Cheryl was 16 and Joanne was 8, it started to get to the point where Cheryl was starting to quote unquote age out.
Mm,
And
yikes.
she saw her dad starting to groom Joanne just like he had done to her. And she was like, fuck, the only way I can prevent this is if get him, if I kill him.
He's gone.
He's
Yeah.
got to be gone. And
Ugh.
so that's what led to this whole sordid decision.
Oh my God.
Now, the big, huge hole is that none of Cheryl's accusations against her father were substantiated. She never told anyone. She kept it a big, dirty family secret, as most do.
Exactly. That's their game. They're not like, hey, I'm raping my daughter. Brr,
Yeah,
you keep that shit tucked far
so
away from
far
everybody.
down. And her father said what most abusers say: don't you dare tell anyone. I will kill you if you do. And besides, no one's going to believe you. So, again, none of Cheryl's claims were substantiated until Cheryl told investigators, hey, you know what? I can prove to you that my father has been raping me because I'm pregnant with his child.
Whoa. Holy fuck.
So they did a paternity test, and the baby was actually Rob's,
Oh, okay.
not her father's,
Huh.
which was a big blow to her defense because now she's right back to, are they going to believe her
Right.
or
Did she
not?
need money for the baby?
Hmm. Yep.
Oy.
So, as you can imagine, this little tiny, tiny town, hamlet of Selden, was completely divided by this case. Some supported Cheryl and didn't feel that she should do any time for murder. And she did what she had to do to save herself and save her sister.
Right.
And some felt she should do a lot of jail time because she had her father murdered.
Right. Yeah.
And Cheryl was feeling the haters and those that didn't believe her claims of sexual abuse, which is part of the reason, aside from the unbelievable shame and scaredness because of the type of person her father was. So, for example, if her father was in a business venture with someone and they didn't do what they were supposed to do, he would take one of his like Uzis and he would go and he would shoot up their car
Oh my
sitting in the
God.
driveway outside of their house. You don't fuck with James Pierson because he'll fuck with you, kind of
Wow.
thing. She was
Yeah.
petrified of him. Of course, she kept her mouth shut. And so now
Yeah.
she's feeling the people that don't believe her claims.
Mm.
She remembered her father telling her, no one's going to believe you anyway. And it felt like he was haunting her, like those words were haunting her.
Yeah.
So Cheryl, Rob, and Sean are now in jail. Cheryl is pregnant. She and Rob are still together. They're continuing their relationship as boyfriend girlfriend. And after 2 weeks behind bars, her brother Jimmy came to her rescue and helped Cheryl make bail.
Wow.
And this is why I said no one lied. Cheryl and Jimmy are super uber close to this day. And he still told the truth to the detectives.
Yeah.
And Cheryl didn't fault him for that. She made decisions. She knew what she did. Jimmy got her out of jail. So now she's out on bond. And as the preparations for all 3 of their murder trials are underway, Cheryl sadly loses her baby
Mm.
with Rob. And that's when they did the paternity test. And that's when they realized it was actually Rob's baby.
Okay.
But she did end up miscarrying. I'm not surprised, probably due to the stress.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
Eventually, Rob pleads guilty to the lesser charge of solicitation, and he receives 5 years of probation.
Oh.
Because his part in this is he paid Sean $400 to kill James
Right.
Pierson.
Yeah.
Sean Pica, I think I said his last name was Pico last time. It's Pica. He pled guilty to the lesser charge of manslaughter because the DA put a deal on the table, and Sean was like, I know what I did. I took a man's life. I will take the deal and do my time. And he received 24 years for
Man,
this.
okay.
He was released in 2002 after serving 16 years. If anybody's interested in doing more research on this case and getting into even more detail, there's a lot of great information on how Sean Pica is doing now, what he did in when he was in prison, and what he's been doing since he's been out. And he has really made massive strides in his life. So that's great.
Yeah.
Cheryl also pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of manslaughter, and she received 6 months in jail.
What?
And after serving just 3 months, she was released on good behavior.
Wow.
Now, her trial was a bench trial, which means that the judge was the jury and verdict person, the judge and jury. And he clearly believed her. She took the stand in her own defense, and she was a very compelling witness. In all of the times that she told the story of what led up to her decision to have her father killed, she never wavered.
Hmm.
She was very believable. And to this day, when you see her in interviews, she's not lying. This shit happened to her. Her brother Jimmy, when she was released, her brother Jimmy and Rob picked her up in a white limousine. They were waiting for her outside of the jail
Of
when she walked out. And
course.
you can see there's video footage out there from the 80s of them waiting for her
Oh
in,
my God.
a gorgeous 1980 something stretch limo. I don't think it was a stretch limo.
Was Rob in the sunroof, like hanging out the moonroof, like,
Did
my
they have
girl?
sunroofs back then?
I don't know. Maybe.
So Rob and Cheryl, they got married in 1987, and they haven't been apart since.
Wow.
Yep. They started dating in high school when Cheryl was a freshman. They went through all of this. In 1987, they got married, and they have never been apart since.
Wow.
They now have 2 grown daughters, Casey and Samantha. In 2012, though, Rob and Cheryl went through another really horrifyingly scary chapter when, at the age of 45, Rob suffered a massive heart attack on Cheryl's birthday.
Oh, shit.
And so he was taken to the hospital by ambulance. The doctors did everything they could to resuscitate him. They came out and they told her, they're like, we've done everything we can. He does not have a pulse. There's nothing we can do. And she was like, you better get your ass back in there and bring him back. You better fucking bring him back. And so they did. They brought him
Wow.
back. He was clinically dead for more than 40 minutes.
What?
And they got his heart to start beating again. And he has suffered no long-term damage from that,
Oh,
brain-wise, like
God.
neurologically.
That's
A
wow.
fucking miracle.
Yeah.
Here's the really fucked up part. As if incest and rape isn't fucked up enough, and murder for hire
Right.
plots and all that stuff. But this, I think, is just, it stings. At the end of the day, other family members and more than 24 friends suspected that James was sexually abusing Cheryl, and no one did anything about it. It wasn't their business. No one went to the police. No one acted on their suspicions. No one said anything to Cheryl. Nothing. People noticed bruises on Cheryl. One day when Cheryl was getting dropped off at school by her dad, she was getting out of the car and she went to pick up her books off her lap, and a Valentine's Day card for Rob fell out of her book. And her father saw it, and he got angry and he punched her in the face, square in the face.
Jesus.
And one of Cheryl's friends was walking up behind the car to like greet her and saw her father punch Cheryl almost a half a dozen times until Cheryl lost consciousness.
Holy crap.
Yep. The friend, to her credit, she immediately went to the school guidance counselor and was like, this is what I just saw. Oh my God, what are we going to do? And for whatever reason, the guidance counselor was like, there's nothing we can do here.
Oh my God. I mean, and it sounds like he was a scary fucking dude that, I'm sure people just were fearful of what they would do to him if they reported him, which is no excuse, but
No, that's exactly right.
it
You're
sounds like
exactly
he just
right.
was a raging asshole.
A raging asshole. And people
Ugh.
were, they were so scared of him that it was like they parted like the Red Sea whenever he was around. They didn't want anything to do with him. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, that's sad.
The whole thing is fucking wild. And you know, and you see Cheryl's interviews and you read articles, and I mean, I have like a fuck ton of source material on this. But one of the reasons why I wanted to share this case is because I have an opinion that may be controversial about this.
Okay.
Not one teeny weeny itty bitty ounce of me feels that James Pierson is a victim. Not one. But I will admit that I'm conflicted. I'm conflicted because when I say the words "he deserved it" out loud, they sound harsh and cold, and like they don't accurately reflect what's like in my heart, or like the kind of person that I am. I'm not going around going vigilante justice, fucking kill him. That's not
Yeah.
me. But I feel like there are extreme corner cases where the death of one person by the hands of another is warranted. And I
Right.
mean extreme corner cases where the victim is so aggrieved by the aggressor that in order to save their own life or the life of someone else, they have to take the life of their offender. But if I say the words, no one deserves to die at the hand of another, I don't know if I believe that either. Which makes, do you know what I'm saying?
Oh,
Like,
I totally get
I
it.
just don't think you can peanut butter spread this. I know in past episodes I have said no one deserves to be murdered. I don't know that I agree with that anymore.
Yeah. Cuz I like hearing this story, him being out of the picture, like I what I take from this like is a beautiful love story for starters. Two people that were
I
like
know.
meant to be together and obviously have like stuck with it, love each other, absolutely adore each other and are meant to be together, which, you know, James was complicating. She still has a fantastic relationship with her brother,
She
which
does.
was probably complicated because he got kicked out. He was cut out of the will. Like their dad was the kind of complicating factor in that. And her little sister hopefully never saw a day of sexual abuse from their father.
She didn't.
So, really, those four people, those good people, other than their mother, that were still living, have a much better, loving life without him here. And there, I don't think anyone could dispute that.
What's interesting is that Kathleen, Cheryl's mother, was super loving, like mild mannered, like sweet as pie. Like one of those moms where you're just like, oh my God, I just love you to death. You're amazing. And just, she was the glue for the family. It was by Cheryl's own account, James did everything he could to help her beat the disease, took her to the best hospitals, the best doctors, spent all kinds of time with her. There was no love in that house, though, between James and the children.
Mm.
There really wasn't very much outward love between James and Kathleen, meaning physical displays of affection like kissing and hugging, saying, I love you, doing things that showcase love, you know, acts of service, things like that. But it was clear that James certainly held Kathleen in a special place in his heart because of all the effort that he went into trying to help her get well. And until she got sick, aside from the physical abuse, there was no sexual abuse. It didn't start with Cheryl until her mother got sick, and it started on the card rides to and from the hospital, which made, like, Cheryl knew it was wrong, and it just made her, I mean, that just is icky.
Only a monster is like, look, your mom is really sick, so you're going to have to fill in and pleasure me. Like, that is
Ex-
fucking disgusting.
it's vile. Look, your mom is really sick, so I need you to fondle me right now while we're driving to see your sick mother.
Ugh.
Yeah. There are articles and things that recount some very specific incidences that I didn't go into because I don't think it's necessary to, it doesn't add to the story. But, at first she didn't know. She was just young enough and didn't know that what was happening was wrong. Her father never paid any attention to her before. He was always off playing sports or hanging out with Jimmy. When Jimmy and James's relationship shit the bed and her mother got sick, like that's when he started paying attention to her. And at first she was like, "Oh my gosh, my dad's paying attention to me. This is so awesome. I'm finally getting his love." She didn't know at first that it was wrong, but she knew it felt wrong. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it probably wasn't until she had those feelings towards Rob and was doing those same things with him that it was like, whoa, you're not supposed to do this with
Yeah.
your boyfriend and your dad. Like
Yeah.
that's not normal.
Yeah. People also recounted that it was almost like James was a jealous boyfriend of Rob.
Yeah, that's what like him
Mhm.
sitting behind them in the movies
Yes.
and shit like that is like she's mine, you little
Mhm.
punk. Like that is so fucked up.
Yeah, it's gross. Uber, uber gross. So what's funny is that it's funny, not funny in a ha ha way, but funny in a like how things just kind of twist when you think they're going to turn. This story showcases how forming an opinion or judging something when you don't have all the facts, which most of us usually don't always have all the facts,
True.
is very misleading. And oftentimes, you don't have the pertinent backstory details that could very well help to shape your opinion in a different way than you would have, or the judgment that you would make in a different way than you would have had you known everything.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So, the moral of the story is expect that what you see is the tip of the iceberg, and there's so much more to it.
Right.
And maybe kind of like have some compassion and cut some people some fucking slack. So, the Hamlet of Selden was very divided because there were people that were like, this was a justified homicide. And there were others that were like, she needs to fry. I don't think anybody thought she should have the death sentence, but they really thought she should do, 15 to 25 to life. And I
Man.
don't. Do you?
No. No, I actually am quite happy with
End result?
the outcome.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, I think they all are thriving because he is no longer around. And, like, the damage that he would have continued to do to their family could have made them completely different people.
Yeah. Cheryl is a fighter. That girl is a survivor. So Cheryl and Rob, they went on to write a memoir. I believe they published it in 2016. It's called Incest, Murder, and a Miracle. The true story behind the Cheryl Pierson murder for hire headlines. I think the miracle is that Rob saved her and then she saved Rob
Yeah.
because she told the doctors, "No, I'm not going to take no for an answer. You go in there and you save my husband
Yeah.
because I can't live without him. And I don't intend to. So do your fucking job and go save my husband." And they did.
That's
So
amazing.
that is the story of the murder for hire plot orchestrated by Cheryl Pierson and Rob Cuccio,
Wow.
who are still married to this day. Isn't that crazy? It's
Yeah.
wild. That's what I'm saying. That's wild.
Yeah.
And God bless her heart that she is still working through her trauma. She'll always be working
Oh,
through her
for
trauma,
sure. Yeah.
but she's using it to help other victims who have been sexually abused in an incestuous relationship or are currently in an incestuous relationship.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's super important. So
Yeah.
again, it's like another piece of that, like, goodness that's on the other side of it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, it's not
Yes.
like, I mean, not that they wouldn't be warranted in doing this, but it's not like she and Rob were together for a couple of years and they both got into drugs and shit just went downhill and like
Totally
life
could have gone
fell
that
apart.
way.
Yeah, absolutely could have easily gone that way, but it's like they've just continued to do good. They've raised 2 women and they still have a strong relationship with her siblings. And it's just like they needed that negative part of their family to kind of go away for that to happen. And I'm not saying like murder whoever's a problem, but the outcome is very happy for them.
Yes.
And I am not going to fight that.
Mm-mm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And Joanne, Cheryl, and Jimmy are super close and bonded to this day.
no.
So Joanne was born in 1976. I think she's 8 years ish younger than Cheryl. So she's my age. So what? She's 48 now. And Cheryl is 8 years older. And then Jimmy's a couple of years older than Cheryl. So they're well, into their adulthood
Yeah.
and they all have families and children of their own, I think. I don't know. Not very much is, I didn't do any research on Joanne or Jimmy. But there is a picture of the 3 of them pretty recently in the last handful of years or so. And you can see the closeness between them.
Aw. Yeah.
And I think that definitely warms the cockles of my heart. I'm very, very close with my brother. And so I can empathize in a positive way with that kind of relationship with a sibling. You're close with your sibling. It's like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? So there's bonds there. You have a bond with your sibling or siblings that is very unique and special and can't be replicated elsewhere.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they have that, and that's pretty damn cool.
I love that.
So, well, on that note, thank you for listening. Goodbye, Jami.
Goodbye, Carrie. You're beautiful. Ma'am, excuse me. Black Betty. Funny, that's what I actually call my asshole is Black Betty.
I'm in fucking love with that idea.
I've borderline ruined a couple holidays.
Happy birthday to you.
Oh my god, Mom, what?
Fuck you. Blah.
Fucking turd bag.
That's helpful.
I have a blankie too.
You have halitosis.